Hello, my name is Jan Bakker. I'm the founder and CEO of Fluidda, a company leveraging artificial intelligence to interpret CT scans and improve the diagnosis and treatment of lung diseases. The following are excerpts from a conversation I had with retired Major General Linda Lee Singh. She's Maryland's first African-American and first woman Adjutant General. Linda explains how deployments in Afghanistan and Bosnia sparked severe allergies that degenerated into a host of respiratory-related maladies, and describes her frustration trying to find accurate diagnosis and effective treatments for ailments that impact her still today. This is the first of several conversations we hope to have with patients and healthcare professionals as we explore ways to improve the US healthcare system through a bottom-up approach that embraces technology, patient outcomes, and preventative care.
So first, I was serving in the Maryland National Guard. So I served over 38 years in the Guard and Reserves, working a full-time job, a full-time civilian job, and then doing part-time National Guard. My first deployment was in Kosovo, much different than Afghanistan. And so as you're progressing up through the military ranks, what you started seeing, especially in the Guard and Reserve, that more and more people were doing deployments, and you became an anomaly if you had not done a deployment, right? And so while I had the peacekeeping deployment, which counted, knowing that I was moving to a much more senior level, I really wanted to ensure that I could understand what I was asking my troops to do, right? So at that point, I had been a commander all the way up through the brigade level. And, when you're sending troops off and you're having to have that conversation about, things are going to be okay when you really don't know how things are going to be, being a leader, and if you've not deployed and having that level of conversation, it just makes it a little superficial, at least for me. And so I wanted to know and wanted my troops to know that, if it was good enough to send them, it was good enough for me to go. So we kind of knew that we were going to be in Kabul for the most part, in and around the area there, but the broader part was Kabul. And so therefore we started getting briefings about the area. We started getting briefings at the mobilization station. We started getting briefings about the environment. and as we started getting environmental reports, several of our folks were like, "Hey, ma'am, have you seen this?" And so we started calling it, excuse my language, but we started calling it the shit in the air report, right? Because it kind of gave you the view of all the different types of particles that were in the air. And, in Afghanistan, it would give you the breakdown of the air quality for the different regions and areas where you would be. And Kabul was, believe it or not, one of the worst areas because of where it was located. And I'm just like, oh, that's great. So I would start having, my eyes would get red. They would burn like incredibly. I would tear all the time. And it made it so bad on some days that I would sit at my desk and I'd be like listening in on the briefings and my eyes would be closed. I actually had someone stop and tell me, you can't sleep while you're on duty. And I looked at them and I go, my eyes are killing me and I am not sleeping and I'm going to keep them closed for the moment. Right? Because it was one of these, I'd usually use a cold cloth, just try to ease the irritation of my eyes. So that was like the first sign that I was having some challenges. When you go to do your physical fitness, right, when you're doing PT every day, I would get up and I'd run or I'd go to the gym. And, in the gym, I would go very early in the morning to try to beat the bad air that would come in because, these buildings, most of the buildings weren't really, like our gym was not so contained that it would keep the bad air out. You could see it in the air. The same with our C-jock floor. And so I would try to get up, and most of the time, if I was running, I'd run at 4:30 in the morning. And then when the air quality was bad, I'd start backing it up earlier and earlier to the point that I was running at 3:30 in the morning to try to beat the crap coming in on the base, right? There was one guy I know for a fact because, we interacted. He got a very severe respiratory infection and they had to evacuate him out. Now he ran midday because his role, he was very, very busy. And so he ran midday most of the time. And he was so sick, we didn't think he was going to make it.
A lot bigger realization now than ever before that pollution is an important cause of lung diseases. Before, we always thought it was because everybody smoked in the 60s and the 70s, and now that's all legacy COPD. But now it's very clear that environmental factors play probably a much bigger role. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's actually a big group of people that have to deal with these issues. But I think it's probably, it's just me. But I think if we can shine a light on it, it's probably a pretty big group.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem, right? So now with the burn pit thing becoming a reality, because I think before they were just kind of like, okay, if you've been in any of these places, you need to sign up on the registry. Now they're starting to say, okay, well, there is sort of a real thing behind this, but we need to really do the research to find out how many people are having this issue. And if it's service connected, meaning if you've been in these places and then you started developing this, and it wasn't that my asthma came on a year after, it was, a couple of years after I'd been to Afghanistan. So, I'm not real sure that we're connecting the dots as we do with most things.
No, and that's what we see with the imaging, is that the lung has a remarkable capability of compensating for a very long time. So you can have diseased lungs and you can still be running fine, having even normal lung function tests because it's not very sensitive to pick it up. So it is quite of a big issue, actually.
Yeah. The summer of 2018, I was having some breathing issues. And I was just like, this is really weird. I don't feel right, but I don't feel bad. They gave me more antibiotics. Oh, you've got a respiratory infection, we'll see. And they said, you know what, we're going to give you, this inhaler. And if you need it, use it. And I'm just like, I've never used an inhaler all my life. Why would I need an inhaler? It was the day that, we were doing this, I don't want to call it a climb, but it was beautiful weather in Bosnia. And we were combining going to very key sites. And this one particular site that they were taking me to, we had to kind of go up this steep incline. And here I am, they're just like, General Singh's pretty fit. They go, well, we're gonna walk, up instead of taking the path. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine with that. And when I say that we were kind of going up this hill, we were moving at a pretty fast pace, and I had to stop. Like, I could not catch my breath. I couldn't breathe. I thought that I was going to pass out. And finally, we get to the location where we were going, and I just had to take a moment. And that's when it really hit me. Now, we were at a very sacred place. This is the place where they basically said that they've seen the Mother Mary. And so if you want to talk about how the reality just kind of hits you, as I was sitting there and trying to gain my composure about what the hell is going on with my body and why am I all of a sudden now having this respiratory issue that I've never had all of my life. And, you're at this very peaceful site and you're watching people pay homage to, this monument. And I don't think they really understood completely what was going on with me, but the tears just start flowing because I'm like, I think this is the end of my career. I think, what has happened for me is that the asthma hasn't gotten better. And even though I had the sinus surgery last year, which I thought was going to really help, it hasn't done anything for my voice, which is, it kind of stays funky and it stays in this period. So I don't know. And they're just like, oh, it's just postnasal drip. And I'm like, are you sure? Right. And so I worry that, and even though I just had, so I know my esophagus looks good. So I actually have a couple of autoimmune issues. I have a type of gastritis where they have to keep check on my lining. And so I just had my upper GI. It's kind of weird that you can actually see all these things, but they give me my photo. And this year, my GI tract looks really, really good. Previous years, it was always very irritated. And so we've always been worried that, as I'm doing these inhalers and whatnot, that, it's going to affect my esophagus and everything else. And so at least from that perspective, I know that I don't have to worry, but there is something still going on with my voice that, most of the time I sound like this. And to most people, they'll be like, oh, that's your normal voice. It's not my normal voice. And so there's something else that causes this restriction, which I don't completely understand. And, with this whole respiratory thing, because I think it's all connected. I think between the sinus issues, the eyes, and the breathing, and not to mention my ears. You figure I was on inhalers. I was doing Nasonex. I was doing another nasal spray, and that was still not getting away from, all of what was going on and wasn't helping with my ear. The sinus surgery, I'm now off of those 2 nasal sprays, which is great. I just use a nasal rinse with budesonide, which is, definitely another form of treatment, but that keeps me really, really good if I use it twice a day. But what has now happened is my ears have gone from not necessarily having what feels like this fluid in them. It's sometimes, I move my head and it feels like there's something shaking. This particular ear stays incredibly dry. It's almost like I've gotten eczema in my ear. That's not what it is, and it stays irritated, right? And so that is, when I go back to the ENT guy, when he does my checkup for my sinus surgery, I'm now going to have him check my ears, because my ears of doing, it's not so much my left ear, but my right ear is doing really funky things. And I'm really worried because most of the infection that I had was on this side of my face.
Yeah, I think it makes sense that it's all connected, right? And I think the problem with current medicine is that it's kind of siloed, right? You go to the ENT doc who doesn't talk about your lungs, and vice versa, etc. So it is a problem for sure.
But it's even worse than that, right? So I was going to Johns Hopkins because my primary care is at Johns Hopkins. And so Johns Hopkins Research Hospital, just saying, I love Johns Hopkins, so don't, but in order for me to go to an ENT, I had to go to an E, an N, and a T. And I'm just like, and so, and I didn't realize that when I made my first appointment. And they go, well, what's bothering you the most? Well, obviously my ear at the time was bothering me the most at that time. So I did that. And then realizing that I would have to make, 3 or 4 other appointments. And I'm just like, okay. So then I started searching for a holistic ENT guy who then, kind of looked a little bit more holistically, but he's also not looking at my lungs, right? I mean, because that's not what he specializes in. So, yeah. I think, you need to kind of drive to this integrated medicine view, right? Because, I know that, there's a lot of institutions that are talking about integrative medicine, but they're not doing integrative techniquing, right? Like we're using old procedures and we're talking about new things, and we're really not driving towards, what is that total flow of health look like for an individual? And everything is connected to something, right? So if I live with this long enough, it's going to potentially drive something else. My fear with this is that both of my grandparents died of lung cancer. And I watched them go through that. And so my fear is that I end up with lung cancer, because that's just inevitable because of how this thing is going. That's the fear, right? And that's not a place where I want to be. So I try to stay very, very active with what's going on with my treatment, but I really don't know, right? Any given day, I could be told, oh, you have stage 3 lung cancer, right? Because we just missed it. I doubt that's going to happen for me because I stay pretty much on top, but I don't know you know, when that diagnosis could potentially come. And I'm hoping that it never does, but.
And that's where I think specifically for cases like yours, I would see in the future you would have at least an annual or maybe 6-month checkup with a low-dose CT scan, which is, I mean, again, the technology is there. It's just the administration made it so unattainable because it's a cash cow for a lot of hospitals. So I think building it up outside of the clinic, having the scan, and one of the things that also from a technological innovation perspective, we hear a lot from the physicians that if we use this technology, we will find out things that we don't know how to deal with. So we're much rather don't want to know, because otherwise we'll have to deal with it. And then we have so many questions and we're already overworked and this and that. So I think the future of healthcare is that the hospitals, the legacy healthcare systems are being used for acute and emergency care. But everything that is more chronic follow-up is just outside of the hospitals in these technology-driven environments. And that's what we try to support, and that's what we try to promote as well. A few things that stood out when I was speaking to Linda was really to hear her frustration with the current system. And it really reminded me of some of the innovations I think we need to make sure that happen in the healthcare field over the next couple of months and years. Is really to kind of turn the tables and shift the paradigm where we step away from a system where we make the patient go to a legacy healthcare system, which is slow moving, rigid, hard to get into, to a system where the care, the information comes to the patient. Like we've seen in areas like e-commerce, where we see that Amazon brings your groceries to your door. In media, where we see that Netflix brings you the movie in your home instead of you having to go outside of your home. Banking, where you don't have to go to the bank anymore, but it's right available at your fingertips. I think the future of healthcare is very similar, where through technology, in a bottom-up approach, a data-driven approach, the information that is relevant to maintain your health is really provided to you as a patient from a system that is set up to look after your health, to make sure we catch the things before they become problematic. And I hope that us as a technology company and others in the space can really help in achieving that, such that her biggest fear, which Linda has, is that all of a sudden you get the diagnosis, in her case, of lung cancer. We hope that that fear will never have to come through, because we can catch it early and kind of solve the issue before it becomes really problematic. So those are some of the things that really stood out, and we're looking forward to continuing these discussions with all the stakeholders in the field and move towards a more efficient and a more, let's say, equitable healthcare system.